We were chatting earlier today and you mentioned something and I was like, dude, okay, it's time to jump on the podcast because you're doing a lot of great work for women. And really, in my eyes, work that a lot of other women aren't doing for women. Like this is very unique in what you're doing and helping women and shift their dynamic in their relationship to men. And that's something that I do. You've been a client of mine for what? And a friend now for 5+ years. It's kind of crazy. So yeah, I guess could you share a little bit more? Like, what is it? Why are women having a hard time relating to men?
Oh boy. It's such a loaded question, but the reality is, I said it exactly, and this is when you were like, yes, let's go, let's go. There's so much woo-woo out there that's like, love and light, we need to, embody our feminine, yet they have no idea that they're still being controlling bitchs, and they are not aware, and I'll speak for myself because I wasn't either, that that's what was plaguing my entire existence. That was what was sabotaging every single one of my relationships, was my lack of awareness into what I have defined today as the toxic feminine.
Toxic feminine. So you're saying that these women are being controlling and they're looking for, the right man or to be more feminine or whatever it is. And that's the core of it is why it's not happening. Just speak more to that.
So, thank you for being such an incredible coach to me over the years. And funny enough, there was a book that I had downloaded that you had told me to read probably 3 years ago at this
Go
point.
figure.
And I think it was called The Amazing Development of Men by Alison Armstrong. And then to give everybody who's listening a little context today, my relationship was in turmoil, my last relationship, and we woke up one morning and we're laying in bed. I'm like, look, I know somebody that can mediate for us, and I trust him, and here's his Instagram, and this is who he is, and this is what he stands for, and this is who we need to pay. And I texted you and I literally sent you money and I'm like, when can we jump on the call? And you were an incredible, incredible asset to my relationship at the time. We learned so much. We got so many tools. And it ended up ending because of a situation, him still going through a divorce and, all of these other external factors. But at the end of the day, when I started looking at how I was being, it was what ultimately I think led to our demise. And so then I call you, of course, you're always my phone call. And you said, there's a woman named Alison Armstrong. I'm like, why do I know that name? And I look in my Audible and I'm like, wait, you told me to read an Alison Armstrong book, 3 years ago and I never read it. And you're like, well, maybe you should have read it, and you're like, but forget that book because she has a new one called The Queen's Code. Go read The Queen's Code. And literally, in the last 5 years of us working together and being friends, pretty much when you tell me to do something, you say jump and I ask how high. So I went and I read The Queen's Code, and it was the most gut-wrenching, eye-opening, soul-searching, and heartbreaking book that I have ever read in my entire life. And Alison Armstrong believes the fairy tale story that she paints in this book is that a lot of women out there are frog farmers turning princes into frogs. The reverse of what's actually supposed to happen in the fairy tale story, because we are controlling, we are complaining, we are mothering, we are avoiding, we are withholding sex, withholding appreciation, we are there's a long laundry list and I can pull it up if we want to today, but it is all so deep within our subconscious, and men out there are just trying to make us happy. And we are not appreciating every single thing that they are doing for us. We're fixated on what they're not doing and ending up in these cycles of control that are ultimately emasculating and, as she points in the book, castrating men.
There's a lot to
So
unpack there.
I read this book and I start on my journey of healing. Why am I being like this? I can't believe it. This is all the ways in which I was like this to this poor man. I even started a blog and I started, writing about all of these things. And I just took myself like by the horns basically. And I put myself into the arena in multiple different capacities. I would say that I was thinking about it before we jumped on. Like, you were ultimately like the case manager for me as I was going to, different retreats, and I was going to different coaches and all this stuff. And I was telling you about all the things that I was learning. And I worked another 12 steps in, the adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families program to really understand my inner child. I worked with Lori Jean Glass at the pivot process. I mean, the amount of work that I have done in this past year has been astronomical. And the healing has been so eye-opening and mind-blowing that now it is so clear for me what my purpose in this world is to help other women so they're not going to be suffering in their relationships like I was.
So, and exactly how were you? Because you probably, like, before you saw that you were doing all those things, if I would have come to you and said, hey, you're doing these things, you probably would have been like, I know. So, like, the people
I mean, I
listening
remember an
that are like
experience.
confused, they're like, well, I don't know if that's me. She's like, I don't know if I do that. Like, what were you experiencing in the relationship, and what would you say to somebody who's like, okay, maybe some women, but not me?
Yeah, I was confused. I was frustrated. I was disassociated. I would shut down. I didn't understand why he didn't understand me. I was complaining a lot, like everything was wrong all the time. And, I always felt like I wasn't a victim, but in the subconscious, I was acting like a victim, like it's, he has to change and he has to do this. And at the end of the day, it had nothing to do with him. Nothing. It really wasn't. Like, I just wasn't accepting him for who he was. And, the man that he is in the world, like, as much as I did respect him and love him, it was my actions that weren't showing that.
There's a lot there too.
I
So,
know. You know so much about it. It's like we got to kind of keep his part out of it. 'Cause you did coach us both, but yeah.
no, yeah, I'm just saying there's a lot there for the listeners and people tuning into this,
Yeah.
because there's, you talking about the toxic feminine, and even what comes to my mind is like girl banter, and usually that's talking shit about the guys you're dating or that are in your life, and like that,
That's correct.
how that plays into the dynamic. And I can't tell you, well, specifically, but like 90% of the clients that I work with are women. And one of the bigger things that I've been asking my clients recently is like, are
Right.
all your other girlfriends single? And what do you talk about when you're together? And it's like, yeah, we're just like talking about how hard it
Yep.
is, or shit talking our men. And I'm like, okay, well, is that helping your case? Like, that's more of the toxic stuff kind of, being thrown around. It's like, if you want to
Mhm.
change things, you have to change how you view him. So I know you've been doing a lot of healing work. What was it for you that opened your eyes outside of that book to like really see yourself and also change your perspective of men in general, not just him?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think I would say that when I started to understand myself more, I started to recognize how it wasn't them that were bad and wrong. It was how I was showing up and what I was creating in them because of my behavior, right? Like, men, and I read, so it wasn't just all of Alison Armstrong's books that I read. I read every single book written by Dr. John Gray, the guy who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And he's got some zingers that way before the Mars and Venus brand came out, like before. And the feminine and the masculine, the polarity that is necessary, right? The simplicity of the masculine, right, is not to be discredited, I guess I could say. Like, women, Alison Armstrong describes it in the book that women are expecting men to be women, right? Like, we're expecting that banter that we have with other women, I had a coach once in a leadership program that he described it as women are constantly basketing. We're basketing. He described it as we're taking other information from each other and putting it in our baskets, and then we remember everything. And then, we'll give the basket, and we'll give it back, and it's just basket back and forth, basket. And he describes it as men are sitting there just firing. They just want to focus on the fire that's sitting in front of them, and they don't have to carry or hold all the information. So when women are talking back and forth, they tend to talk over each other and understand things that aren't being said, and just, go back and forth with ease. And the male brain, as Alison Armstrong describes it, is single focused. Okay. So when we are expecting a man to be like a woman who has diffuse awareness, when we can see things all happening at the same time, and women are capable of spinning multiple plates, and that's where the chaotic feminine energy comes from, right? We are getting frustrated when the masculine in our lives are single focused. Like if I ask, my partner to go grab the pizza at, the pizza place 2 blocks away, he's going to literally hang up, go get the pizza, and then come back. If I were to call him and throw like, oh, can you, he's going to be like, wait, I'm just trying to get the pizza. Like, what, if it were a woman, she'd be like, okay, I got to get the pizza, and then I got to go to the grocery store, and this, that. It's just a different way. And that in a man is fucking beautiful. It's amazing, because it's that single focus that keeps the world going. And it's this controversial, I mean, I guess it's not controversial, it's become a societal narrative that's so accepted nowadays, is the patriarchy. The patriarchy is bad and wrong. Well, the patriarchy is what keeps us calm and grounded a lot of times in the world. And the patriarchy is the pillars of our community. And the patriarchy, the sacred masculine, the healed man, is creating space for the feminine chaos in the world and the way that our minds work. So it's the lack of appreciation that women have today for men being who they are that are creating so much conflict.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about toxic feminine, I love this because there's a lot of talk out there in society about the toxic masculine this, and men aren't showing up in this way, and XYZ. And I've seen a lot of shift on Instagram very recently, at least on my algorithm, about women like evoking the best in men. And a lot of conversation about that, or like, this is what men really need. And are you slowing down and listening? It's kind of a talking to what you're speaking about. And then, I also saw some stuff about men's mental health and other things, and looking in the comments, just how many men are struggling. Men kind of like deeply. I'm even in a space right now, and I was thinking about this today, where it's like, okay, if during rough times, women get a lot of support often from the girlfriends, they reach out and ask for help,
Right.
or communities, and men, generally speaking, myself included, and I'm in the fucking work, tend to isolate and work it out on yourself or on your own. And that's just so culturally ingrained into us. And so when we talk about the toxic masculine, I don't think there's anything toxic about masculinity, but it can shift and be toxic traits from unhealed places. So when you're talking about the toxic feminine, that's just a topic that's not talked about too often, that I think really gets to be highlighted. And, could you just describe or talk into a little bit more of that? Because you got into it in the beginning. But again, I think there's just a lot of people might be like, oh, well, that's not me.
Yeah.
And, for me, in the early days of my healing journey, I was like, oh, I'm not like a toxic masculine. Well, because I wasn't being aggressive, or, I wasn't outbursts of anger or whatever I thought that meant. Well, I lacked boundaries, and I lacked a backbone, and I was codependent, and there were definitely ways I had toxicity, right?
You were actually plagued. Yeah, you were actually plagued by the toxic feminine as well. Because in men, the toxic feminine shows up as no more Mr. Nice Guy. No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. One of the greatest books that all men should read of all times, because men are falling into these cycles of codependency, of trying to make a woman happy when they need to stay focused on what their purpose is in the world. According to David Dieta, if you want to, in The Way of the Superior Man, if you want to stay focused on your masculinity, you stay focused on purpose. And it is this narrative that has plagued men recently about the patriarchy being bad and wrong, and men are suffering, and that's what's so unfortunate. And I believe that if the women heal, the men will too, naturally,
And
right? I
there's,
heard
I hear it in the comments. I
we're
hear it in the
constantly,
comments
you and I
right
are
now.
sharing things.
People saying, "Oh,
Yeah.
well, why do women have to do all the work? What men need to heal?" I've seen those comments. What do you guys say to that?
Yes. Okay. So that's the whole. That is the biggest premise of what I am setting out in this world to do. Do the work. Even Dr. Nicole Perella's book about doing the work. No, we get to surrender. We get to surrender. The feminine gets to surrender. Surrender to the toxicity, surrender to the wounds, surrender to all of the ways of being that aren't working anymore. There is no more work ultimately that gets to be done. The journey gets to be taken. The magic gets to happen. The pain gets to alchemize back into purpose, because we are built, the feminine is built to nurture and love. But what's happening right now is the feminine, the toxic feminine, is infiltrated our bodies, and we aren't able to be that love anymore, because we are stepping into the toxic feminine behaviors. We're stepping into control. We're stepping into masculine. We think that we can do it all. We're not letting men do it do it with us, or help us, or love us in any sort of way. We're expecting so many things with it. It has to look this way or that way, right? And we aren't allowing them to be who they are. And so there isn't any more work that women ultimately need to do. It's surrender to who we get to be.
Bars. That's
Simple as that.
the inverse of the work.
What
Yeah.
is that?
It's just the
That's
flip
correct.
of it. Yeah. So,
That's correct.
hmm,
Yeah.
man, this is good. I think, the people listening, if you had taken notes or get some ahas, I hope you are. We're going to keep this conversation going, but Molly, where can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
Oh, definitely. Instagram is the best place right now, at Molly Nicole Murphy. I guess my name will be right here. For some reason, Facebook and Instagram have been disconnected, but you can find me on Facebook too. Always shoot me a DM if you have any questions. I'm here to support. That's big for me. Is there's a lot of people out there. You can book a 15-minute mini call with me and just like jump on and figure out what's going on in your relationship, because I have really gotten clear that my purpose in the world is to make sure that we're saving relationships and people aren't suffering because of these wounds that are subconsciously controlling everything that we do in this world currently.
Right. And it seems like it's shifting from the man needs to change and he needs to do this thing differently, and all about him, to taking ownership is really what you're talking about. Because, and I've seen this too, and there, it takes two to tango. So there's always going to be, yeah, maybe he needs to shift and maybe that, but we can't control that, and I think that's the beauty that I've seen and witnessed even in my coaching with clients is
That's correct.
oftentimes I work with one person that's in a relationship. I don't work with both often. I love working with both, like what we
Yeah.
did together, but there can be a shift with just one person because you're changing your come from and you're not demanding them to shift, but you actually, like you said, drop in and surrender to all of it. And in that, you it's like you drop into your feminine. You don't work to be in your feminine.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so the difference between the journey that I take women on versus what's happening out there now in the world is it's great, because it's a very vast difference. Like I said earlier, the woo woo and body femininity and step into your being and love and light and all this, but you're still walking out the door and bitching about your relationship, or you're still walking out the door and finding things to control. You're still mothering your partner, right? Doing all of these things for him that he doesn't need to be done. But like withholding your love from him, even though you're sitting in hours of meditation and calling in, the angels and using all of your crystals to heal. Great, wonderful. Those are all things. I do it. Like I have an ex that coined me a bougie hippie. Like I am 100% that girl also. However, if we don't look at all the ways in which we are showing up that are toxic to our everyday life, to our relationships, to our children, to our girlfriends, okay, we are going to keep this cycle of making men bad and wrong and keep dividing the masculine and the feminine. And it is going to play into the relationship recession that we are dealing with today. Because there's a narrative also that's like, oh, I don't need a man. I'm in my single girl era, this and that and whatever. No, like I love it if a man's going to be like, oh, here's $100, go get your nails done. Like, are you kidding me? Like, of course. Like, here's my credit card, go shopping. So fucking lootly. Is that something that I look forward to having again one day? It makes me feel loved. It makes me feel feminine, and that's not bad and wrong. Can I pay for my own things? Absolutely I can. But I don't want to. Especially not things that are going to make me feel sexy, like a new dress, or something that's going to make me feel good about myself, like the expensive highlights that I get. Like, I mean, it's just, there's so many ways in which men can show up and be the love and the provider, right? But what's happening is women aren't allowing it anymore. They're splitting the check. They're making them wrong about everything that they do, and it's not good enough. Like it's never, no man is good enough out there. It's so sad.
That's the thing, is like, especially as a man, and I'll speak from example, it's kind of like we'll do those things if we sense there's room for it. But if you shut us down once, we'll back up for life. It's if
Yep.
I have personally experienced this myself, and I've also witnessed it, and I've also heard about this through other coaching clients, where it's like men do want to support, but if there's no space for it, or you're not asking for it, or we offer it and it gets shut down, or we do it and then it gets judged and ridiculed as you did it wrong. Okay, well then I don't feel needed, so I'm just gonna retreat and be here on my own to experience the peace that I want to experience. And it's not out of a lack of love for you. This has just happened subconsciously because it's like, well, there's no space for me. I don't feel valued, so why would I go waste my energy to do something that somewhere I don't feel valued? And so I think for people listening, it's because we mentioned this earlier of like, well, men want to help us, or men want the best for us, and it's like some women sadly don't believe that.
Yeah.
And it's definitely true.
And which is sad.
That men want to support, and we want it.
Absolutely.
Like, it is in our nature.
Sorry, it got really loud here. I live on the same floor as the pool, and it's a nice day here in Florida. So all of a sudden, you can't hear anything. Okay, good. So I'm like, oh, here we go, party on for Lickerdale over here. Anyways, but yeah, it's so sad because I remember a specific moment when my ex and I were coaching with you, and it honestly, like, my stomach's starting to hurt, like, about to retell this story, but we had a group chat with you, so you did one-on-ones with both of us, and then you did group with both of us. And I think we worked over like a 6-week period. And so one off every other week, like we either had one-on-ones and then the group. And I was going to my first trauma intensive. I remember this like it was fucking yesterday. And I knew that I was about to dig into really tough things, and it was going to feel really scary. And I was scared going into it. The night before, we had a big blowout fight about nothing. Like, I could not tell you what the fight was about. And I know it's probably something that just I started because I was so scared. And he knew that too. Like, that fight was not nothing. Like, it didn't mean anything. But before I went, I knew he was having his one-on-one with you that week. And I messaged something about how he was doing this, and this is what I need, and how I would like for him to show up, and he's not doing this, and all, and I was making him wrong, like left and right. And I remember you being like, "Whoa, good thing you're at you're at an intensive right now. Why don't you go talk to the therapist about that?" Who was also his therapist. I don't know if you remember, but it was
Yeah.
his therapist whose trauma intensive I was at, and I was like, ugh. And then he was like, "I am so mad at you. I am so glad I had my call with Kevin." And he told me that he got on the call and just like lit it up because he was so pissed about like what I said. And looking back, that's the kind of shit I did all the time. Like, I remember he didn't listen right. He didn't listen to me right. Like, what? Who makes someone wrong for how they listen, how they're there showing support and listening? Like, that's how toxic I was. I had the most incredible man that had been as a trained counselor and was like so sweet, so loving, had his own nice guy stuff, but like so there for me, so in love with me. And I made him wrong for the way that he listened to me. Looking back, I deserved to have gotten broken up with in a text for that alone. Like, who? I mean, it's unbelievable now that I know better and that I see so many women. Like, I'm in one of those groups on Facebook. Someone told me about it because they're like, "Oh, there's your target demographic. Are we dating the same guy?"
I've heard of those
Oh
things.
my God. Like, it is the epitome of toxic femininity, the toxic femininity, the women in there, the expectations, the things that they are saying about men, the way they're lighting them up. And there are good stuff that's happening there. Like, he's an abuser, he's this, he was in jail. Like, there's not, those groups aren't all bad and wrong. But for the most part, these women, and then they fight with each other. And then they're like being mean to each other, and they're saying just horrible things to each other. And I'm like, "Oh my God, like, this is the issue. We are the problem. It's not the patriarchy. We are the ones with the deep inner child and inner teen wounds. We are the ones with the experiences that we are recreating over and over, that we are stuck on one thing that happened, and we have changed our narrative and decided that all men are bad and wrong, and men are getting fucking castrated left and right as a result." Simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It doesn't feel good. I mean, I've been in dynamics, and it's interesting because it's like the toxic feminine feeds, evokes, you could say, the toxic masculine, whether that's for a man, his aggression, or his nice guy syndrome coming out. For most men, I would say it's the nice guy thing. So it's like there's a problem here. I want to come in and fix it, which most men love doing. And
Yep.
we're not going
Yep.
to hurt you, but we're going to lean in. And that is in a way a trauma bond of, you need to do it right. And I love you so
Mm-hmm.
much. So like, how can I do it right? And back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, because it's never going to be enough. And so somebody's got to
Yep.
stop the game of ping pong going on and be like, I'm not going to play this game anymore. And I think that's what most men do. They really desire a life of peace. I think women do. I know women do too. And men, I think, just have
Yep.
a little bit more of a lean towards desiring that than women in some fashion. And if their peace gets disrupted to a certain
Yeah.
degree, then they're like, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to fight for this. And whether that's they're out emotionally or
Yep.
they get out of the relationship, actually, that happens more often than not with the men. And it
Yep.
comes from the toxic feminine poking buttons and poking holes at something that's not there.
Yep. I mean, that's ultimately what it is. And for the women out there that are listening right now, to take all of the responsibility is also like it's not a trauma, it is a trauma response, because in the beginning of my healing journey, I was taking all the responsibility. And I remember a couple calls between you and I, which was super interesting because I'm learning all of these things, and you're going through a breakup. You were going through a breakup at the same time. And so the roles switched all of a sudden. You were like, "Guess what? Like, I know you're going through it, but I need you to coach me because I'm now going through it. And I know the stuff you're learning is really going to help me. So let's chat." And I know it felt good for you to know that like what was happening was real, you know, like what was happening of you being made bad and wrong was ultimately very real. And I think it felt also really good for you to hear me have these awakenings because it felt so similar to what you were experiencing and how much you related to my ex when you were coaching him. And so I think that experience that you and I had at the same time was healing and eye-opening, right? And that's
Yeah.
why you've been a big proponent for me to get my voice out there for this, you know, as I'm going through this healing journey. You're like, Malls, you're onto something. Like you gotta get this out there. Women need you. Men need you. Like everyone needs you. I'm 100% responsible 100% of the time for what I'm creating, right? And he also had his own responsibilities in the dynamic where it took him like 6 more months, and I think he's in a new relationship. I have no idea. He also finally read the book No More Mr. Nice Guy after I suggested it and after we were broken up, and he was like, God, this is me. I'm like, yeah, our entire relationship was a covert contract. Nothing I did was good enough because he was being so needy trying to fix me, and if I wasn't okay, then he wasn't okay. So that's overwhelming to me. I was disassociated and I was the avoidant in our dynamic because it was so much for me, and I didn't have the depth and understanding of my feelings that I have today. And so he was constantly frustrated with how I was showing up and what I wasn't saying or doing, but he had his own work to do. And I think a lot of men out there aren't getting the right support because men suffer from attachment wounds. Men suffer from their anxious or their disorganized attachment or their avoidant attachment, right? And all of the attachment styles, what people don't realize, are all a form of codependency, one way or another. Okay, and men are potentially going to a female therapist. Okay, they're going to work with intensives with female therapists when the goal for men is to work with other men who have had healed perspectives on women, who have healed their communication, who have healed their attachment wounds. Men working with men, getting out of their comfort zone. I mean, my ex does the same work every single year with the same therapist and the intensive with the same group of guys. Like, it's time for something new. If the same patterns are being created, right, you need to go find something different. And ultimately, men are creating situations with their therapists that are acting as like, you know, mothers for them, the mothers they didn't have. And so I think men get the right support, like you said, and they get the healing. And sometimes, like, I really honor my ex for breaking up with me because that was what he was doing to protect me ultimately, because he knew that the dynamic was no longer working. And so him walking away from our relationship was an act of courage, and it was an act of protection, and why I will never look back and think that what he did was bad and wrong. In that, during that time, could the dismount have been a little cleaner and softer? Yes, absolutely. However, he was doing the best that he could with the tools that he had at the time.
Mhm.
And that's it.
I
It's
love what you
getting
brought up
new
about
tools.
the mentorship. Because a lot of women come to me in my space. I mean, you know this. It's like, I love, like, gosh, this is amazing to get a man's perspective on this, because there's, especially in the work, let's just say, it's more female oriented, and so there's a lot of healing groups with women and how to
Mm-hmm.
manifest your man with a woman coach and all the things. Which, again, there's a space for that, and that's beautiful. It really is needed. And there's also a space for
Mm-hmm.
getting support from a man. And it has become more and more apparent to me
Mm-hmm.
the more that I do this work, and I've been doing this indirectly for a decade, directly for 6 years, how needed it is for me to do this work because of how little spaces there are for women to go to for a man to hold them in this that's actually safe.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it pisses
Yep.
me off to the nth degree when I hear stories, and I hear them often, about women getting abused sexually or manipulated sexually
Mm-hmm.
in healing containers, and
Yep. Yep.
from men that they go to for healing, and so it's
Yep.
that's some shit. But anyway, that's why it's one of the bigger reasons why I do what I do. Um, even as you were talking about men's work and men finding men to do men's work with, and I've taken a step back from men's work personally, in the men's work circles and the groups, and I'm a part of a lot of them, and I've been a part of a lot of them, and I'm friends
But
with
you've
a
done
lot of
it.
them. And
And
so
you've
yes,
done
I've done it.
it.
I've done it, right? And there's been beauty in it. And I think I'm just in a season of life right now where I'm like, that ain't it. They're missing something. And I think what they're missing is, and Allison talks about this in The Amazing Development of Men, the first book that we mentioned, of learning from an elder. A lot of these groups are men in their 30s
Mm.
and 40s, kind of in the same era of life. I don't see,
Yep.
and maybe there's a little bit of like, oh, you're just at the next level. But I'm talking about a man who's in his 70s talking to a guy in his 30s is a totally different dynamic than a bunch of guys in their 30s hanging out together doing men's work.
Totally.
And
Yep.
so
Yep.
that's the missing piece. And that's why there's been missing. We know this, if there's not initiation rituals and all the stuff that's missing from culture nowadays, turning from a boy to a man, those things just don't exist anymore. And in that used to be the elders bringing young boys into manhood. And the elders in this
Yep.
coaching space are in their 40s, and I'm sorry, but that's not being an elder.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's
So
so true. I think
yeah,
you touched on something that's really important. The seasons of healing, right? There's so many different seasons that we get to be in. Right now, my season is fun. Like, I'm fun. I am ready to have fun. I want to be fun and do anything that is fun. I'm taking a summer long, basically trip, and I have not a lot of plans as a result of that. And it is going to be nothing but fun and free and no expectations kind of summer. And that's because of all the work that I have done this past year. And so knowing what season you're in is really, really important, because I took a step back from therapy. I took a step back from all the coaching. I'm only working one program right now, and because I need to focus on pouring what I have back into women, and focus on spreading this message of healing, and starting with reflecting on all the ways in which you are showing up that is ultimately the toxic feminine. And so knowing that my healing is on quote unquote pause. I still work one program right now, but it is not the depth in which I was engulfed in over this past year, because I'm ready to integrate. I'm ready to integrate. I'm ready to have fun. And I love what you said about the elders, because I'm going to go back and spend time in the Midwest with my elder, God, it's weird to say they're elders, but they are my aunts, and like understand how they've stayed married for as long as they have, or gotten remarried, and just be around the women that I really truly admire and trust, and like embody that energy and what that looks like, because it's priceless. It's priceless.
yeah,
You sit in a knitting circle, for goodness sake. As long as they're not sitting around bashing men, I'm here for it.
yeah. That's awesome. And part of the work is putting the work down. So I'm
Yeah.
proud of you for just putting the work down and have fun. And
Yeah.
really, you're doing
I
what
also heard the other day, part of
I think there's a lag. I was saying you're doing what you're teaching women to do, which is surrender to it, not do more of the work. And for as long as I've known you, you've been doing the
that's
fucking work
exactly
in
correct.
every program, you know,
I
and now you're
know.
not. And I'm so proud of you.
I know. Yeah, totally. I am not about doing any more work right now. I am about being free. I'm about having fun, surrendering, and passing this gift that I have been given, the transformation that I have had, and helping other women have the same transformation. That's the season that I am in right now. And I heard the other day that sometimes part of the work is screwing up and misbehaving. Like, I'm not dating right now. I have no interest in it. I am traveling with a friend this summer, and we're just gonna go where the wind takes us, kind of thing, and see what happens. And that's what's so cool. But I wanted to go back to something. I was thinking about how the women out there, you were saying that it's not me, I'm not that way, and I'm good to my husband, or I'm whatever that is, right? I don't complain, I don't control, that's not me, I'm not that way. Well, if you ever feel misunderstood, if you feel confused, if you don't understand why he doesn't do the things that you want him to do, or you're perplexed as to why he doesn't step in and show up, that is ultimately some of the withholding that you're doing. Because when you're unable to understand yourself and understand what you want and need, and you're not able to vulnerably communicate that, then you're robbing him of a gift to be there for you, right? So if you're caught up in a cycle that is, I don't want to say that's necessarily toxic, it can be stagnant. If your relationship feels stagnant because you're at a turning point, like, why isn't he being this way, or what's it going to take for him to step up? It's ultimately a disassociated, shut down place where the feminine cannot flourish because she is confused. And that is part of what this epidemic that's happening within our feminine beings, is just not knowing how to communicate vulnerably to a man that has ultimately been, like you said, wounded. And you described it as like, okay, you don't need me, like, I'm good, I can't do this, I'm not, it's never going to be good enough anyway, so forget it, right? And she's just wants so badly for him to step up and do it. So that's part of it as well. And I'm curious how, what you hear that, I mean, I know because sometimes you've called me about clients and been like, Mal, you got to help me out here. Like, I got one that needs to chat with you, not me. She's not hearing me.
Mhm.
That's happened a few times. And so, what are your thoughts on how do you see that often? Like the women who are feeling incredibly misunderstood and
Oh
like
yeah.
unseen and unheard.
That's where it starts.
Yeah.
And when people join in with whether it's coaching with me or my course or something, they still have that. And then I don't need to speak to it, but eventually it shifts because the course is help like ownership of different perspectives. Maybe I'm viewing this wrong. And then they start showing up different, and then their man changes. And it's like, really? Yeah, there's your proof right there. And then
Yeah.
exactly. And then they actually start feeling like he is understanding them. And it's really just a reflection because you're understanding yourself and you're actually making that shift. And, the reason that I tee things up to you sometimes is because for tougher situations, let's just say that, I, I can, I can present things, but there is, with some of my clients, I've noticed that there's a barrier just because I am a man. So all of the filters of what men
Yeah.
are, especially if it's a more extreme case, um, there's the opportunity to unravel those, and when somebody works with me. But if
Yep.
it's on thick, I'm like, all right, I need Molly, come in, tell her, so that they can have that aha moment, and we can actually then lean in and do the work. But and that's just the nature of it. And that's really just supporting somebody in their highest. And sometimes coming from even if it's not me, coming from a man, and the even your subconscious hearing a lower toned voice, like what that'll do to your nervous system, it puts you in a certain state if you have trauma there with men. So
Yeah.
like, I really commend and admire all the women doing this work, whether it's with a woman like Molly or with a man like me. Like, it takes courage to lean in and surrender. Surrendering is probably the most strong
Yeah.
thing you can do, because everything else is doing the
Yeah.
work, which looks like courage and strength, but really it's just controlling your control. Like you're still in that fear based
Yeah,
control situation.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and
That's
it's
exactly what
so
it is.
it's like
Controlling your control.
it's still in the root of fear. And
You nailed
surrender
it.
is to really drop into your feminine and let go of control and surrender fully to God's will for your life instead of your own. And in that you literally shift your beingness, which changes the lens you view life through. And now all of a sudden you see your man for how he is showing up instead of how he isn't. And when you start feeding what is there instead of trying to point out what isn't there, he starts showing up in the ways that weren't there before. Why? Because men thrive on yes, challenge, but from other men. With a woman, men thrive on recognition and acknowledgement. And I think so many women get that construed of like, oh, I don't want to blow his ego up. Well, if you want him to show up fully for
Yeah,
you,
no.
pump that ego then. Like he's gonna feel better around you.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's so, so true. And I think that I have a gift of being able to see people. Like you've said that to me, and when I was putting together everything for this launch, that was kind of the people I've worked with, the testimonials that they were all similar to that. Like my Molly can really see and speaking to, what's not being said, or, what she's really hearing, what you're not saying. And what I've found as a feminine is I do that, and I have done that in the past, and being like, you're so amazing. But it was the toxic feminine, control or emasculation or complaining that just canceled all of that out. It didn't matter, because it's like you said, that way of being, it's that aura in that loving, peaceful place that wasn't showing up. So whether I was saying in this same tone, like, you're amazing, babe, like, I think you're the greatest, like, you have all this amazing shit in your life, like, look at, if they don't feel that at the end of the day, there ain't nothing I can say that's gonna invite them in. And that's why if a woman is saying something and the woman is acknowledging and admiring and not withholding, and you're not able to receive it, and it feels like, ooh, like, that's too much for me, like, I don't think I can handle that, then ultimately, then there's work that the masculine gets to heal as well.
Yeah. So talk more about this course you're launching that's actually officially available right now.
So it is officially available right now, and we got to stop using this word course, Kevin. I don't have a course. I
She
have
doesn't
a
have a
journey.
course.
I
She has a
have
journey.
a voyage that we got to embark on a voyage with a group of women. My goal is to save them as much time and money and heartache as I possibly can, because it took me a year, a whole darn year to heal from this breakup. And I don't want other women to have to spend that money and that time. I want them to get it as quickly as they possibly can to move on and step into the ways of being in which are going to invite men in which they are going to be able to communicate, in which it's going to be clear on how they get to move forward. But first, it is so incredibly important that we look at all of the ways in which the toxic feminine is sabotaging your life and your relationships. And that is undefended. I will ask every woman to lay down her sword. I will ask every woman to de armor. I will ask every woman to stop fighting and give me the opportunity to hold up the mirror so that I can perform the spiritual heart surgery that I perform, and literally leave that heart open and not allow you to close it anymore from your old wounds, from the old behaviors, from, the toxic feminine that keeps that ice around your heart, right? We're going to melt it. We're going to melt it all off, and you are going to continue to live from a surrendered place, know when your triggers are coming up, be able to use the tools that I will give you to repair what's happening within you, because it's usually within you. It's not the other person that's causing that, right? It is a trauma response to something that happened before, and really step into the most magical and juicy journey that you could have for your life, because you finally had the courage to heal.
You were called the Ice Queen once.
I was once called Ice Queen.
Having a heart, ice around your heart.
Oh, I was like called the Ice Queen. I'm pretty sure my ex is the one who said that. Oh boy, I was definitely the Ice Queen,
I say that's all
which is
jokes, but
so interesting
yeah.
because
Go ahead.
no, it's not. I mean, it's not, because we can laugh about it now, but I was the Ice Queen. I was ultimately the Ice Queen. I was completely disassociated. I was angry. I was sad, underneath a lot of those things. And the ice, it was like it kept a protection there, and it kept the love from flowing in and out, really, because I was so scared to be vulnerable and to open up. And what was so sad about this last relationship, and you had a big support, you had a big part in supporting me in the demise of the relationship, and you had a big part in supporting me as my healing journey began, was that I did love him so much. I loved him like the absolute love of my life. And I showed that in a lot of different ways. I was very loyal, I was very loving in a lot of ways, but it wasn't the ways in which he needed. And I never knew how to figure that out. I never stopped for a minute and asked him, what is it that you need? How can I support you so that this relationship can work for you? It was all about me. I was selfish, self centered, self seeking, self righteous being probably the biggest one, and self sabotaging every single step of the way. And that I want, for 6 months, I wanted to go back and try to change everything and get a second chance with him. And I know that it's my soulmate twin flame. Like there's no doubt about that relationship. But the work had to be done for me on my own to even begin to see what I caused, the pain that I caused him in the dynamic, so that I could heal and potentially find that type of love again. And I don't know if he's done it. We don't communicate at all. I hope for him that he has, and he's worked in circles with men's groups and gotten different types of help than he's had in the past, support, because I know that he's aware that he had a part in it too. We both work a 12-step program, and very clear on what that 4-step looks like, and all of that. And the thing I think that is the most sad, that I don't agree with more often than not, is the idea in 12 steps. They say a living amends. They say the living amends is to leave that person alone. And I'll tell you right now that there's something that I learned, with Lori Jean, is the repair process, and what repair looks like. And repair doesn't always necessarily mean get back together with the person. That does not mean repair. Repair means repair what was broken, repair the perspective, repair the fights and the conversations that really hurt, right? Repair the heart center so that each person can move on and move through the relationship. And why the dismount of the relationship is so incredibly important as well, so that people aren't falling into this hate for the other, and they can't move on and they can't forgive because the dismount was so painful. And in my case, that's what happened. Like 2 days before my grandfather's funeral, he was supposed to meet me in the Atlanta airport, and I got broken up with in a text. There was so much. And then continue on, my dog passed away. You and I were on a coaching call for you that morning when the dog, you had to go to the emergency vet, and I didn't hear anything, and he knew what happened, and it was so incredibly painful. And I know that that that's happened to so many people out there, and the opportunity for repair is real. And the opportunity for repair for so many couples, people that co-parent, mommy, baby daddy, mommy, baby mama, like that kind of thing. Those relationships they all get to repair. There's just repair that isn't happening, that is also perpetuating this toxic feminine, that's perpetuating the toxic masculine, that's perpetuating the narrative of the patriarchy being bad and wrong. There's just so much out there that gets to repair. And I believe in having those conversations, and I have tools to give my clients to have those conversations where they can feel heard and understand what the other person might be feeling in advance, so that they can prepare for those conversations as well.
Let's go. So y'all check out Molly
I
online.
know. Let's go.
Thank you for being on the podcast. Finally,
So
this is a long
I
time coming.
know you're like, when you're gonna be ready for me soon. I know it. And then today you were like, yeah, you're ready. Look,
It's
we're doing
time.
it.
Real. Molly's the real
It's
deal. For everybody
time.
tuning in, y'all heard it here first. I trust you with my clients. So for everybody tuning in, like, I trust Molly and her work, and I know this person very intimately and deeply, and she is the real deal. And I don't recommend people's stuff often. So seriously, check out her work online. Also join in on that journey for Undefended that I believe is launching very soon. I don't know when this podcast is going to be coming out, but DM Molly if you want to hear more. That's Molly Nicole Murphy on Instagram. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say that you trust me with your own stuff
That's true
also.
too. Yeah, Molly has coached
Like
me.
I am
Mm-hmm.
I am one of the coaches behind the heart guy. I am one of
That's true.
the trusted servants to not just your clients, but your relationships in your life. So
It's very true. Thank you.
absolutely. And thank you. I mean,